At 6 in the morning, there are only three kinds of living creatures in the park. Ducks, all of them acting like they own the place, joggers who hate themselves just enough to get up this early, and one pigeon I see here every single morning, who right now was staring not at me, but at something behind the fountain. It took me a second to realize that something was a woman on the wet tile. At first I figured she was just stretching before a run, then I saw the angle her body was at, the arm pressed to her chest, and that specific look on her face, the look of someone who's already run through every curse word she knows in her head and is now deciding what to do next, cry or say them out loud. "Don't move," I said, before I'd even reached her. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Very funny, I was just about to bust out some dance moves," she shot back through her teeth, and for some reason that calmed me down. People who joke through pain usually aren't dying anytime soon. I know a little something about that. I watched way too many medical dramas with my mom growing up. I crouched down next to her, careful, like I was afraid of spooking something wild. "Okay, I'm not letting you lie here. Even the pigeons are giving you a judgmental look." She glanced at the bird, which really was standing a few feet away, staring at her like a stern judge. "He's always like that. I've seen him here every morning for 3 weeks now. Pretty sure he's got a personal vendetta against me." "How's the wrist?" "Alive. Offended at me, but alive." She tried to sit up, bracing on her good hand, and the short ow that escaped her didn't have anything to do with jokes anymore. Hey, I steadied her shoulder, light, no pressure. "No heroics at 6 in the morning, please. My schedule's wide open, and judging by the looks of things, so's the pigeons." She let out a breath and actually looked at me for the first time, like up until that moment I'd just been a voice, not a person. "Naomi," she said. "Byron. Pleasure to meet you under such romantic circumstances. If it didn't hurt this much right now, I'd appreciate the sarcasm. Appreciate it later. Right now, just tell me if you can move your fingers." She tried. Her fingers worked, the wrist didn't, and her face went white as a page of a contract I'm scared to sign. "Yeah, that's not a sprain," I said. "That's the kind of moment where you call an ambulance and pretend everything's fine at the same time." "I don't want an ambulance. I want to stand up, get to my car, and drive myself." "Great plan. One problem. That's your right hand, and I'd bet money you're right-handed." She stayed quiet a beat longer than she needed to for a denial. "Thought so," I said, already dialing. While we waited, I took off my jacket, not dramatically, just casually, like a guy who happened to be less cold than she was, and draped it over her shoulders. She tried to wave it off. I acted like I hadn't even heard the objection. "Your bag's over there," she said, nodding toward the bushes where her small backpack had gone flying when she fell. "Today's plans, keys, phone, already on it, don't worry. If the pigeon tries anything, I'll intervene. Thanks so much for your heroics. Always ready to serve." The ambulance showed up 12 minutes later, which felt a lot longer than that because we were both trying to talk about anything else to avoid talking about the pain. I found out she's an architect working on something down by the riverfront, and that she can't stand it when clients call her architect lady like it's some kind of compliment. She found out I'm an accountant and that I run every morning not for my health, but because if I don't run, the numbers in my head start running on their own, and that's a lot worse. As the paramedics were loading the stretcher, she suddenly jerked. "Wait, my bag!" "I've got it," I said, holding up the backpack like I was presenting evidence in court. You don't have to come with me. You've got your own stuff going on," she said, and something in her voice landed somewhere between hope and the discomfort of admitting that hope out loud. I checked my watch, then looked at her, then checked my watch again, deliberately slow, like I was weighing some enormously complicated decision. I've got exactly as much going on as a guy who runs laps around a lake to shut his brain up, so 0. I climbed into the back of the ambulance behind the stretcher, and the doors shut with that dull thud that means there's no going back now, only forward into the ER, where a bunch of plastic chairs were waiting for me, a coffee machine that charged $1 for something it officially called a beverage, and no idea how any of this was going to turn out for her. The ER on a Sunday morning is its own special kind of purgatory. There's a guy with ice on his leg insisting to everyone within earshot that stuff like this happens with couches. A teenager with a split lip who's staying stubbornly quiet about how it happened. And now me, who by this point didn't even remember why I hadn't just gone home. Seriously, Byron, I've got a phone, I've got Uber, I've got a mom who lives 20 minutes from here. All great options, but I'm already here. Coffee's already bought, I said, holding up 2 cups from the machine, so let's not waste my sacrifice. You really know how to sell a bad idea. It's cappuccino from a hospital vending machine. It's either a bad idea or nothing at all. She took a sip with her left hand, careful, like she didn't trust it, and raised her eyebrows in surprise. Not bad, actually. See? Another myth busted, right here, right now. She laughed, and the laugh cut off in a short ow, because apparently even laughing hurts when your wrist is sitting at the wrong angle. A nurse called her name, and Naomi got up, holding her arm to her body like something fragile she was afraid to drop a second time. "Well," she said from the doorway, "wish me luck with the X-ray. Good luck, I'll be here." She disappeared through the doors, and I sat there staring at a wall the color of a hard-boiled egg, wondering why I hadn't left yet. My run would have been over by now. I'd be home with bills that are always waiting for me like hungry cats. But something about the way she'd tried to get up on her own on that tile instead of calling for help had gotten to me more than it should have. The cast went on in an hour and 40 minutes. She came out with an arm that looked like a white club marked up with "Hang in there, champ" from some nurse and a Sharpie, and an expression like someone who'd just lost an argument with her own body. "So how'd it go?" I asked, standing up. 6 weeks. 6 weeks without my right hand, right when I'm turning in a riverfront project. She looked at the cast like it had personally tripped her. I can't even pour myself coffee right. That, by the way, is a solvable problem, I said, and without asking permission, grabbed another cup from the machine, which she took with her left hand, wearing that same careful, grateful look people get when they're not used to being helped. I drove her home. She gave directions, short and businesslike, like she was embarrassed to even need a ride. Outside her building, she hesitated with the car door, and I watched her try to juggle her bag, the cast, and the door lock all with one hand. That little dance of awkwardness that never even occurs to people with 2 working hands. "Listen," I said before I had really thought it through, "I run around here tomorrow at 6 anyway. I could swing by." "Byron, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I'm offering because I want to make sure the pigeon doesn't ambush you again." She gave me a long look, one where I could practically see pride wrestling with common sense. "Just a walk, not a run. I definitely can't run right now." "A walk counts. I've got flexible standards." The next morning, I pulled up right at 6, and she was already standing by her building, sneakers on, cast wrapped in a plastic bag in case of rain, even though there wasn't any rain in the forecast. "The bag's just in case," she explained, catching my look. "Architects always plan for the worst-case scenario." We walked slowly, along the same lake, past the same pigeon, who eyed her like he recognized her and hadn't forgiven a thing. The conversation flowed easy, about her project, about my numbers, about how strange it is to be a grown adult and still not know how to tie your shoes with one hand. "Here, let me," I said automatically, when she sat down on a bench and started wrestling with a shoelace using her left hand. "No," she said, sharper than she probably meant to. Then, softer, "Sorry, it matters to me that I learn to do it myself. Otherwise, it'll feel like I'm spending these 6 weeks just waiting for someone else to do everything for me." I nodded and pulled my hands back, even though every cell in my body wanted to tie that damn shoelace in 3 seconds flat. Instead, I sat next to her and quietly watched her fumble with it until it finally worked. Crooked, with a double knot that was probably going to come undone within the first 100 feet, but it worked. "See?" she said, looking up at me with that mix of pride and relief I was already starting to recognize as something distinctly her. "Told you." We finished another loop around the lake, and saying goodbye outside her building, she suddenly asked, looking off to the side, like the question cost her more than she wanted to let on, "So is this a daily thing you're planning on doing, or is this a one-time charity event for the injured architect?" 6 weeks, it turns out, isn't all that much time when you count it in morning walks instead of dates on a calendar. Sometime in the first week, we were walking past the fountain, and the same pigeon met us with his usual judge's stare. "You know," Naomi said, "I think it's about time he got a name. He's been here longer than either of us." "Fair point. Any ideas?" "What do you think? Look at him. What kind of face is that?" I studied the bird. He scowled harder, like he could tell we were talking about him. "Maurice. He's got the face of a guy named Maurice." She laughed so hard that Maurice huffed off toward the bushes, offended, and after that the name just stuck on its own. Every morning, passing that spot, one of us would always toss out a "Morning, Maurice," even when the bird wasn't actually there, even when it was starting to feel a little ridiculous for 2 grown adults. But it was exactly those small, dumb things, I think, that kept pulling us back to each other week after week, more than any serious conversation could have. Around week 2, we stopped splitting up right after our loop around the lake. At first, it looked accidental. She'd walk a little slower near the park exit, I'd take a little longer digging out my keys, until finally I worked up the nerve to say out loud what I'd been thinking for a few days. "There's a place around the corner that makes decent coffee," I said, nodding off toward the street. "Not the hospital kind. If you're not scared of coffee that costs more than $5, that is." "Is that an invitation or just a geography lesson?" "An invitation. I just took a while getting there." She smiled like she'd been waiting for that longer than she wanted to admit. The coffee shop turned out to be tiny. 1 table by the window, and a barista who, it turned out, knew Naomi by name and made her something with almond milk without even asking. She was clearly a regular. We sat there for an hour instead of the 20 minutes we'd planned, and for the first time the conversation wasn't about the wrist or the pigeon, it was about why she'd gone into architecture because of her grandfather who used to build bridges, and why I'd gone into numbers, because unlike people, numbers always add up if you do everything right. "And when they don't?" she asked. "Then you look for the mistake until you find it. It's calming, honestly, knowing there's always an explanation." She looked at me longer than the question really called for. "That's not how it works with people." "No, with people you just have to guess." After the coffee shop, our walks started stretching longer. We invented excuses to take the long way, veering down toward the riverfront where she'd point out the building she was working on and tell me why the facade architect had gotten into a fight with the engineer over the roofline angle, like it was the most dramatic story of the century. I listened and realized I didn't actually care about the roof. I liked the way she talked about her work with her hands, even her left one, even with a cast that got into the way of gesturing the way she wanted to. When the cast finally came off, she texted me one word, "free," and a photo of her arm, pale with red marks like a map of roads she hadn't walked in a while. "We should celebrate," I said when I saw her that evening. 6 weeks of patience deserves more than a walk. "Actually," she said, hesitating in a way that wasn't like her, "I wanted to have you over for dinner. I cook pretty well when both hands are working, and I feel like I owe you more than a thank you." Her apartment turned out to be exactly what I'd pictured. Lots of sketches on the walls instead of paintings, and a kitchen where she moved with confidence, like someone used to commanding a space instead of getting lost in it. She was making something with chicken and rosemary, telling me at the same time how her mom taught her not to be scared of seasoning food for real, not just for show, and how I cut the bread so crookedly that she took the knife away from me with mock outrage. "Are you an accountant or what? You'd think you could handle cutting even slices." Numbers and bread are different disciplines. Over dinner, when the conversation dipped into a quiet moment, she suddenly rolled up her sleeve, the same one she always kept covering whenever I tried to read what was written on her cast. "You want to finally know the state secret? I thought you forgot." She pulled a photo out of a drawer. Someone had taken a picture of the cast right before it came off, and there, in small handwriting near the elbow, was something in my own handwriting that I'd scrawled one morning while she was busy tying her shoes. There was a person here who was learning not to give up. "I wrote that and forgot about it," I said honestly. "I didn't forget. I saw it every morning while I got dressed, especially on the days I wanted to give up." We sat quiet for a while after that. Not awkward quiet, just the kind of quiet where words suddenly feel unnecessary. Somewhere outside, Maurice was probably asleep in his little corner, with no idea this whole thing started because of him and a patch of wet tile. "So," I finally said, "same walk again tomorrow at 6? Or are we cleared for a run now?" "You know, I actually like walking, even without a good reason." "That's a first. Without a good reason?" "No," she said, looking at me the way you look at something that's already decided. "There's a reason, it just doesn't have anything to do with a broken wrist anymore." And I'm guessing right about now you've got a question rattling around in your head. So are they actually together, or just two grown adults who've been walking in circles around a lake for months pretending it doesn't mean anything? I won't drag out the suspense any longer than it deserves. Yes, we're together. It just didn't happen with some big announcement or flowers on the doorstep. It happened over a coffee shop around the corner, crooked slices of bread, and a note on a cast I didn't even remember writing. Now, when people at work ask how we met, I tell them she fell for me. Naomi always corrects me, not fell for, fell near, and it was because of the rain that came through overnight and hadn't dried off by 6 in the morning. And Maurice, that same pigeon, still shows up for his shift by the fountain every morning, still giving her that judgmental look, though at this point, I'm pretty sure he's just jealous.